Welcome to the first episode of QEDTalks, where we're going to go through and talk with random people. Well, maybe not so random, but talk with people from the RPG community. And my first guest here is Qikwik. Qikwik, welcome to QEDTalks.
Thanks, Ked. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be the first to pop your cherry on this.
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing, so this will be like super low bar quality, but we'll see how this goes.
Okay.
So first of all, let's just like get in a little bit like about like who you are and like how did you start? When did you start in RPGs? That type of thing.
Well, my name's not actually Qikwik, obviously. Cal, and I started like it was almost like 20-something years ago. I remember walking into a gaming store because me and my friends were like, we're interested in D&D. We kept like hearing about it. We kept seeing the books and whatnot. So we bought the original like 3.5 player's handbook, and we noticed that where there were people playing in the back. So we went to go and check it out. Like the store owner was like, yeah, there's people that play here every week. You should go ask them and go talk to them. So we went back, and that's how we met. We met like some like close friends of the group now, and like we started playing with them, and like we were just immediately hooked. We were loving every second of it. Everything about to character creation, the RP, just everything about it we loved. And like I found out real fast that I'm a bit of a dice goblin. I have a jar, like one of those big like mason jars, just full of dice right now.
Are you the type of player that you just like throw them all into one area then?
Yeah. Like I have a couple like sets that were like given to me as a like present or whatnot with like a hand knitted dice bag. And that's like my primary set I use, but like I always have like a massive hoard of dice if need be.
I think most players are like that. I'm the odd one out in that like I've got like a organized like fishing tackle box where like the sets are separate, and then for the mixed ones it's like the different dice types are separate, so like D4s and D6s and stuff.
Oh yeah, I originally started doing that because I liked organizing them, but then I was just like, this is too much work. I sorted out a few like one or two sets that I really like to use. I just took all the other ones, threw it in the bag.
Nice.
So when I was that guy at the table whenever like I needed to find like certain dice like or like a lot of D6s for like a fireball spell or something like that, I would dump out my bag and dice would just go everywhere.
It's always a nice moment. Always a nice feeling. So you mentioned you went in to get like the 3.5 book and stuff. Had you heard about RPGs before? Like, did you have any preconceived notions about what Dungeons and Dragons was before you tried it?
We kind of heard like little tidbits on like what D&D was, and like we had like our like Hollywood like pre-notions towards it, and like we had like the whole like Christian like notions towards it, like where it's like, oh, the D&D's the devil, and like, well, that just made us more interested.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, like we kind of like we had like an inkling of what it was about, and we were just really interested to try and like dive in, figure out what it was, and like we dipped a toe in, we got pulled right in.
Nice. And now that you are, I would say, a much more experienced player, obviously you've been doing this for years at this point. Do you have a particular type of RPG game that you prefer over others, like a more crunchier game or a narrative heavy game, like or even a system?
It's really hard for me and a lot of my players to stray away from D&D, like 3.5, 5th edition, Pathfinder even. We don't talk about 4.0.
I think there was good parts about 4.0 that I've brought over. Like it wasn't all bad, but
there was certain mechanics of 4.0 that I really enjoyed. Like instead of like having like these abilities that you can only use like certain amount of times, like there were certain things that you could do whenever the fuck you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoyed that. I liked how it was like broken down. Like it was really like easily pick up and go. It was like for a person who's just getting into D&D, it was very like friendly towards.
Yeah, that I'll agree. It was very easy to learn. I mean, that was also, I think, part of the detriment was, I mean, everything was samey, right? Whether you played a wizard or a fighter, it really felt like you were using the same set of rules, or the same mechanics, which is...
Past level 8, everybody felt the same.
Yeah.
Everybody was the same. Everybody could do just about the same thing, just flavored differently.
But I do feel that people are too harsh on 4th edition myself. Not that it like was great or anything. I won't play it myself, but there were a lot of good things over that I have taken.
It was a learning experience. It was definitely a learning experience, and like I'm happy I learned that lesson. That it just kind of made me realize what kind of like system I really like, and like although 4th edition wasn't terrible, it was just like wasn't for me. It was too simplistic, too baby's first D&D kind of thing.
Baby, I like that. So yeah, what's like your favorite systems these days, or even of all time?
I've been really hooked on 5th edition lately, but like you have really opened my eyes to like these other systems like Fate. I really love Fate and its narrative driven gameplay, and I love Cypher. Like I think Cypher is swiftly becoming like a fan favorite between our groups.
Yeah, I think so as well. As much as I love Fate, and don't get me wrong, I love the Fate system. For all of you out there that are watching that are not as familiar with non-D&D systems, usually you've got like your crunchy, like rules heavy things on one side, and your super narrative heavy but very rules light on the other side. I find Fate is that very, very narrative. Like it's sort of on the extreme end of the narrative side. There's very few rules. I like Cypher because it's almost like the middle of the road.
Yeah. Cypher, you got like those nice crunchy rules where you can like really like maximize your character, but it's also very heavily narrative driven as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, no, I think Cypher is really becoming a favorite of mine too.
It's just useful for anything. I like those universal systems. Not that there haven't been universal systems before, but GURPS, like things like GURPS, they had their uses at their time period, but it was still very much a like 90s design philosophy, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I've had players of all types, those that make in-depth characters and those that just want to run like shallow comedy archetypes or focus on mechanics and tactics. All are valid types of play, by the way. But I know you prefer to be a little more in-depth, on the in-depth serious side. And I know you've mentioned before about character generation, tying the characters together into the world you're playing in. What, in your opinion, is the most important facet as either a player or a GM about the whole character building process?
You gotta like, I'm not expecting, like as a GM, I'm not expecting my players to know their character immediately. Like we're all learning your character, even you that you sat down and like wrote down the numbers and like put it all on paper. You're still learning your character as you go. So one thing I definitely find that helps is character ties. Tie your character to another character. Give them a flaw. Give them a hobby. And like I feel like that really helps flesh out your character. Like Lance from our Numenera game, he's a mommy's boy. He's a big, tough mommy's boy, and I absolutely love playing Lance.
And from the GM's perspective, obviously, having that connection was something I could play off of, because each of you having a connection to the world meant that it was much more impactful when I'm like, hey, so now they're in danger and you need to do this to save them. And you're like, oh, I have a reason to do this now. I'm not just adventuring for adventuring's sake.
So like character ties between other characters is really helpful, because like, it gets you invested, whereas like if nobody has character ties, it's like, oh, this person's in danger. I'm just like, well, I have the treasure with all the gold and everything already, and I'm just going to leave because that way I can guarantee getting this. So, and it's just like, it kind of like, it stops it from like making it so like every player is just having their own private adventure with like a bunch of like other people with them. And instead, if when you got those like in-depth character ties that like kind of like, whether it's like you're adventuring with like your brother or your sister or your lover or a friend of like that you grew up with, this is someone you care about. This is someone you're here sharing this adventure with.
This is part of the excuse me. This is part of the reason I always found it so much easier to GM, or I find maybe not easier, but it creates a more consolidated campaign in like either urban settings or restricting the players to an area that they have to return to fairly often. Because if you play the classic D&D where like we're going off on an adventure to the wilderness and we'll never return, then I mean you could have all those connections back home, but they're distant now. They're basically non-existent.
You've essentially uprooted the group and moved them somewhere else. Although those roots still exist, you can't really use that anymore.
That's what I liked with the new Numenera. It's like, yes, I am sending you on this far-off adventure, but it's so that you can return home and help those people. Whereas, like, if you just go off to adventure for adventure's sake, yeah, I mean, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. If you just want to go kill some shit, go kill some shit. But you want to create a little bit more of a complicated story.
You gotta give that like that party that drive to want to like come back and like, or that like that want to go out and do the things that they're doing. Like, if they're just doing it for gold and fame, or are you doing it because you're trying to figure out what's going on so you can save the world?
Yeah, exactly. Now for the next question, I'm gonna preface this saying that I love the groups that I'm in. I'm super happy with them and the way everything is going. We've had some really good games these days. However, frankly, sometimes I wish I had a few more of you, because I find myself having to make more and more of my games light, fast, and comedic in nature these days, which isn't a bad thing. Like, sometimes we need a little levity, especially with how the world's going.
Yeah, you can absolutely do like a super serious game, but it's important to have like those downtimes, because when everything's like serious all the time and everything's like super intense, it's like that becomes the norm. Yeah, but on the flip side, a lot of my games lately have had to be almost comedies in most of the content, and I've had some stories in the past that I've told that have been able to mix some more serious content and tone, and I do kind of miss that sometimes. But I find it's not for everybody. Specifically, not everyone is able to separate some of the serious in-game content versus real life as easily. Especially when, the world around us is trying to self-destruct. So being the type of player that you are that can handle it, and I know you're pretty good at this, what do you do, either as a player or a GM, because you've been both, that helps you place those boundaries and expectations to help with moments of more gravitas or seriousness, or to split the, hey, this is the fantasy, this is the real life, please don't get them confused? I don't think there's any one thing I could say here to just magically fix it, like where it's like, oh, you now can like separate. It's time and experience. It's just knowing that like this isn't you. This is a character that you're playing in this world. So things that are happening to him aren't necessarily happening to you. And like you said, a lot of players struggle with that separation. It's one of the reasons why I try and stay away from like PvP, whether I'm a player or a DM. I try and steer away from that, because player versus player, although it can help drive the narrative, can really like throw like an anchor on your boat.
That is something I do find you have to tiptoe very carefully with. Like minor PvP interactions, like in Cyberpunk, when I shot Hyde in the leg because I thought he was doing stuff with my wife, but it was partly because he had just fueled me with drugs in my coffee, unbeknownst to me. I think that was good PvP because it had an end point. I didn't want to go beyond just shooting him in the leg, and he got hurt, but at the same time, we knew it was for fun story reasons, where I have seen PvP against players go very badly in the past.
And like a lot of like players, I won't never name names, but like a lot of players that I've PvP'd against their mentality of the game switches. Like, you could see it. They go from like D&D fun times to I have to win.
Yeah, it becomes more cutthroat to them, or it just changes the game.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It is very rare that I would I would push that. Normally, my main rules to the game are you have to want to work together and follow with the story and stuff like that. It's difficult.
I think probably the most challenging character I've had to play of late is Thrune, my half black dragon barbarian, who just, although he is just bitter and hateful and whatnot, and he has no ties to anyone else because we were literally pulled from different parts of the world, and now I'm forced to work with this group. The only thing at the beginning that was pushing him to work with this group is I get to go home soon, but. And I couldn't just be like, oh, I'm not working with you, or I'm gonna start killing people that annoy me. I couldn't do that because it would really destroy the group narrative. So I pushed along, and I feel like his character development has really blossomed. Although he's still bitter and somewhat hateful, he's now I kind of care about these assholes, so please don't kill them or I'm gonna have to kill you.
Yeah, I know you become semi-protective occasionally over Teacup, trying to teach him this robot that's only been alive for 11 days, how to live, although you've taught him some very bad things as well.
Oh yeah. God, Thrune is a very bad influence on Teacup.
But I think Thrune is a good example of being able to play an evil character in a non-evil party. You don't have to. It doesn't mean you have to want to destroy everything and kill everything.
Yeah, I'm not going around skinning puppies and burning kittens because it's Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's evil because the things he's done in his past. And he has very little regard towards life when it's juxtaposed to him.
I think that when people try to play an evil character, I think that's part of the reason. For many years when I was younger, I just wouldn't allow them in my games, partly because I couldn't trust a lot of players for it. But a lot of players, they play an evil character, and that just means chaos and destruction. When really, to me, whenever I played an evil character, the majority of the time, it's not because they want to hurt everybody around them. It's just because they have something they want to achieve, and maybe they're willing to go a little past that moral line to achieve it. That's what makes them evil. It's the whole Thanos thing. He just wants to help the universe. Maybe that means destroying half the universe, but he just wants to help the universe. Yeah,
and 99% of the universe looks at Thanos as this evil tyrant that wants to destroy and half the population of everything. And he's probably no, you guys, you dummies, I'm trying to help you. He doesn't see himself as evil.
Yeah, that's the best evil right there, always. Yeah. So going on to the next point here. And if you have anything you wanted to talk about at any point, feel free to jump in. If you've got something that you want to ask me or reciprocate, feel free as well. But I do have this next point here. Let's go on to this. I know I've released some videos on similar topics before, but getting other people's viewpoints can only be a good thing at this point. So, how has learning other systems than just D&D helped you in your play?
Coming from D&D 3.5, 4th edition, 5th edition has really almost given me a bias towards other systems. I look at them it's a gimmick. It's not going to be around forever. We'll play it for a little while, then we'll go back to D&D. But like I said, learning these other systems has really opened my mind. I love Cypher. I love Fate. And it kind of puts it past D&D for me. It was as much as I love D&D, but it's very rules intensive. You can only do what your character sheet allows you to do. Where in Cypher, you can you say what you want to do, and the DM goes, all right, give me this roll. And that you could be doing just about anything, like jumping from a balcony, swinging across a chandelier to land in the passenger seat of a car. Go for it. Give me a speed check.
Yeah, I find like theoretically you can try to do that stuff in D&D too, and we have seen stuff like that happen. But it doesn't have the rules to support it. You're right. It doesn't have like the GM basically has to make the rules up on the spot and try to figure out how this would go, which is nothing wrong with that per se. But if you already have supporting rules to help you allow the players to be creative narratively, I agree. Games like Cypher and Fate and everything that support this, I mean, it's a different set of tools. Like, yes, a butter knife will work as a screwdriver, but maybe a screwdriver would be a better screwdriver than the butter knife.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the type of game you want to play. I find what system you want to use.
Yeah, like just being able to have that narrative control and being able to declare a narrative point by spending XP. Be like, hey, here's an XP. I'm going to declare this plot point, or this like when we were playing the Cyberpunk game. We were trying to get away from the gang, and when we had these like people that we just rescued from, like, we need to place the light low. I'm going to expend experience points and say, hey, I know of this safe house. Now, I've already worked that safe house into my character's background. Like, he used to live there, and he doesn't anymore because of reasons.
Yeah, so we had like a nice little free place to just sort of hole up into, and it was all because on the fly you could use your resources, like in this experience, to like be like, hey, I'm going to take GM control just for a split second, and I'm going to declare something. I fucking love it.
And I think that's why I like Cypher and Fate so much more, because it gives players that agency where D&D kind of lacks. You can only do what your character allows you to do. Like, you can only move 30 feet, you can only attack this many times, you can only do XYZ because you have these skills. Whereas in Cypher, you want to do it, go for it.
Yeah.
Give me a roll.
And from a GM's perspective, for anyone watching that's not familiar with Cypher, check it out. Monty Cook is amazing at writing this shit.
It's amazing.
He makes it so much easier for the GM side of things as well, because a lot of the onus is taken off of you. Like in D&D, like, players are responsible for their characters, and that is it. That is all they have agency over. And even then, it's only what's on the character sheet, not even anything else about the character. And the GM has to handle, or the DM in that case, has to handle everything else. All of it.
Yeah.
But in Cypher, I feel like a little bit more shifted to the players. You can be a little more creative with things. You can control the world a little bit more. I mean, in Cypher, the players make like 100% of the roles. The GM just has to focus on the narrative and the story and the details, which is amazing.
Also, pro tip for a lot of like new DMs out there: when your party, your group starts RPing and it's just the RP is flowing, let them RP. Let them go. Let them have fun. Because although you're not doing anything, you're doing everything.
That is something I've gotten way better at. But once upon a time, I really struggled with that, because I'm like, I want to be part of the game too. But a good GM has to know when just like sit back, have a drink of coffee, like just maybe like work on your notes. I mean, you should be taking lots of notes, right? This is a good time for it. Like,
absolutely. And like, because like, you essentially, like, you gotta think of it as like, it's a weird way to think of it, but like you're babysitting like X amount of kids instead of trying to like entertain them all the time. And once they're playing with each other and having fun, you could sit back, have a sip of coffee, relax, take a breather, adjust your paperwork, set up the next encounter.
Like that, give them breather from the kids. Yep. Yeah, that was something I struggled with for a while, to the point where there was certain things I leave like actual physical sticky notes around. And one of them was to, as a GM, just like back off, just let them do their thing and just like let the players role play for a while. Don't butt in.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention the sticky notes, because like when I was running my Dark Souls-ish game, my third monitor looked like a fucking peacock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, all right, they're doing this. I pull off the sticky note, and I give it a quick look over, or they just did this. I'd write a sticky note and stick it up there.
Well, that was back. We were still using Roll20 at the time, right? So
yeah,
it was a lot harder for you to like. You couldn't like make the full journal entries like in Foundry and stuff like we do now.
And as much as I like Roll20, I think it's a good like opener to like online play, which is another point I want to get to. It is very clunky. It is very poorly managed and can have a lot of issues. As much as I love it, and I wouldn't mind using it again if nothing else, I much prefer Foundry. Foundry is the way to go.
Yes, I agree. Like Roll20 to me, it's like if you and a couple of friends just want to like see like a basic picture in front of you and chuck a couple of dice and nothing more complicated than that, sure, Roll20 works great. Nothing wrong with it, although the servers are a little wonky sometimes. But generally, works great. If you want to do anything more advanced, though, first of all, to unlock half the toys, you have to subscribe to their service.
Yeah.
Which is cheap at first, but adds up if you keep doing it for like years and years. Whereas like Foundry is just you pay for it once and you're done.
Yeah, like they just updated their what's it called with the lighting?
The in Foundry?
Yeah.
Yeah, the lighting and wall system and everything.
Yeah, they just updated it so it works better. But like Foundry's already been doing that since start.
Yeah. To do that in Roll20 is you got to be. It's different. It's different. I won't bash them at all because it is a very good service, and we used it for years.
Yep.
I signed up with Roll20 when they were like just a baby company just starting up.
Yeah.
Because I think that's when Shadow Hawk, a friend of ours, introduced us to another GM that we know way over in Colorado that was running games, and I'm like, all right, let's try this Roll20 thing. Because I hadn't done much online stuff before then.
Yeah, and going back to like the online versus in at the table thing, I really do appreciate that we have this ability to play online, because I live all the way the fuck up in Ottawa. Like, if I wanted to come sit down at the table with you guys, that's like an 8 to 10 hour drive for me. Yeah. Like, because I'm like, for those that don't know, I won't say where exactly I live, but I am south of Toronto. In Canada here. He's Ottawa. That is a drive. That is a good distance. On the other side of the pond for you.
Yeah, because I got the lake right above me.
Yeah, it's just like, and this is why I really appreciated online play. When you initially like messaged me like, hey, I have this server and we play online, I was like, well shit, I haven't played with you guys in ages, and I was really new to playing online, so like it has its benefits and it has its downsides. Some of the benefits is like it is so easy to go to game. I just sit down at my computer, log in, and I'm good to go.
I don't even need pants.
Yeah, I don't even need pants. I don't have to walk an hour to half hour wherever to carry all my stuff to some person's house and sit at their table. I get to sit in my comfortable office chair at my comfortable desk with my X amount of screens and play D&D here.
So nice. Oh, the days of lugging suitcases of books maybe behind us.
Oh, I do not miss those days. Like, I cherish those days, but I don't miss them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the one downside that we are constantly running into online is we have one pipe we can talk through. So you'll have like 6 or 7 people trying to talk at the same time, and it just turns into a jumbled mess.
Yeah, it is. It has been a very much a learning curve because it's not even just a technical issue, although it is in a way. It was a social issue. We had to learn how to talk as a group when there's only that one channel.
And like, we have some players that are when they get excited about something, they'll talk fast and loud and like over talk everyone else. And we have other players that are a little more socially reserved, and they'll wait and wait and wait until like there's a lull. And by the time there's a lull, we've already moved on to the next scene.
I am glad that our players have also sort of picked up with the fact that it's like, okay, we can't do the side table talk like at a physical table where you do like a little bit of side RP and stuff like that. But there's a text channel for a reason. And yeah, when the major talking is going on, and like the GM, the big person is talking and something like that, if you want to do some side RP in the text channel, that works out pretty well.
We started to pick up on that, and I absolutely love that. So it's like, there's like the GM's running like personal plot or whatnot, or explaining a scene or explaining what happened, we'd be over here like in Cypher or Cyberpunk just texting at each other. Like, hey, where are you?
Yeah.
Why did QB shoot? Hide.
Yeah. I like the fact that we use text for the actual like texts on our phones and stuff like that for our characters in Cyberpunk. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Those systems have online play has definitely changed our lives in a lot of way. I do miss certain aspects of being at the table. There's a lot of things I could do as a GM at the table that I can't do online. Things like using my full body language to represent different characters. I have to rely way more on the voice now than just like everything. Yeah.
That's where you're used to, like you said, putting your whole body behind it. Now you're very limited. It's a limitation of the media where because we're playing online, you're solely like stuck at like voice only. And like we can use like webcams and stuff like that too, but like at the same time it's not the same as in person.
It's not the same. You miss a lot, and even if you have the video, you still miss a lot of the body language. You're only seeing like from like the tits up type of thing. So you're still missing out a lot. Subtle expressions, and a lot of times you're looking at the board at that point anyways, and not as much at the video.
Yeah. You're looking at the board, you're waiting for a roll, or you're playing out your next move or whatever.
Now, for me, one of the biggest hurdles, going back to about the different systems and stuff for a second, for one of the biggest hurdles I've gotten is getting players to be willing to try out and accept new systems. I mean, RPGs are not simple games to play. Like, oftentimes there could be an entire collection of books that involves world lore, rules, etc. In your experience, what kind of hurdles does a GM face when trying to get people to try these new things?
I think like the biggest hurdle is to try and convince them, the players, that this is a good system that they should try. And like so many players, like myself, and one of the reasons why I was very apprehensive in trying a new system is I've tried other systems that are not so good. They have a really good story and background.
Riffs.
I wasn't going to say it, but I have a giant stack of Palladium Rift books, like 3 feet to my left here. And every once in a while, I'll crack one open and try and get ideas for a future game that I might be interested in running.
Great world lore. It's the rule system
amazing. That's
a mess.
But Kevin Sabidia is very like protective of his IP. Like he doesn't like anyone else like help him essentially.
Protective is I would say, a very measured word on your part to describe Kevin Sabidia. Yeah.
Or there's like other systems where it's like, although it has a very interesting world, the game system is a pile of dog shit. And I didn't realize it because I was looking at it through rose-colored glasses before, but the 7th Sea game. The system, although the world is amazing, the system needs an update.
Yeah. Well, we didn't try out it wasn't that long ago. For a little update for anyone watching, we went and a friend of ours was like, "Hey, I'm going to run a 7th Sea game for you guys." I'm like, "Oh, cool! I would love to experience that." And he ran the 1st edition. Apparently, there's a 2nd edition out as well now, although it's not dramatically changed. My description of it is it's a very like early 90s design RPG. Like lots of tables, rules are everywhere, not really organized. Like it's very 90s style RPG. At least that's the only way I can describe it. It seemed like a neat idea. I'm sure the world lore was was interesting. And you said you had had fun with it in the past, right?
Oh yeah, like when I don't know if we used a different system or anything like that, but like when I played it, like it's like 15, 16 years ago, I had a lot of fun with it. I played I don't know what they're called, the Vendals, whatever, a gunslinger. I had like 5 to 6 guns on me, and that would be my thing. I would shoot, and I could do like trick shots and stuff like that. And I had a lot of fun with it. So when like our friend was like, "Oh, I'm gonna run a 7th Sea game," I was all for it. And I was like, "Yeah, I remember having good times with this game."
That's the thing, those fond memories. I even had it, like, I had a similar experience lately. I'm like, man, I had so many good times in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. I wonder, maybe we should crack those books open again sometimes. And I cracked open my old, like, player's handbook from the 90s and, like, looked at the rules. And I'm like, this is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
How did we like this? But
I actually did that recently with one of my Rift books. I was like, is it possible to possibly run this in like a Cypher or Fate game? I was like, oh yeah, that's 100% possible. And I was looking at the rules of the game, like of the Rift game, and I was like, how the fuck did we do this in the past?
I know, right? Yeah.
Character creation took hours and hours.
Last time we ran a game, I remember, like, we got together and it was like a 6-hour session, and that wasn't even like a proper session 0. It was just character creation. That's all it was. 6-hour session, and some people didn't even finish.
Yeah, no, like the poor sobs that we dragged with us to, like, oh, we're gonna play Rifts. It's awesome. They're like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And then we gave them the books, gave them the character sheet. And they're looking at it like it's all in Chinese, and like we just kind of like left them like. We didn't like ditch them, but it's like we were focusing on like trying to get our characters, and as an experienced Rift player, we were still having trouble.
Yeah, and I think I was the GM for that one. I tried my best to like float around and help different people, but it's a lot because they're like, hey, I would like to do this, and I'm like, all right, well, it's one of the following Splat books. Give me a second. Yeah. And then, like, how does this rule work? Well, there's like 3 different ones, and they all contradict each other. So,
that's when I wish we had Cypher, because like we could take Rifts and be like, we're gonna run Rifts, but we're gonna use it in the Cypher game, and I would be 100% for that nowadays. Yeah,
like that game sort of like fizzled out or failed. I think partly just because Palladium is not a great foundation. If it had been run in Cypher back then, I have a feeling that game would have lasted a while. Like, I think we would have loved it.
And that we would have found out that Cypher, I wouldn't say 100% superior, but like is far greater than a lot of other systems out there, because it just kind of like it gives that player that agency and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, hell, even if 5th edition had existed back then and we like just tried to like somehow shoehorn it in the 5th edition, it wouldn't have been perfect, but I would have taken that over Palladium, because for people watching thinking like, oh, we're like, oh, 5th edition bad, Cypher good, we still love 5th edition. Like, I'm still live streaming a 5th edition game every Sunday right now.
It's a great system. Sit down at a 5th edition table anytime. I will still run a 5th edition game anytime.
So once again, it's the right tools, as we were mentioning, it's the right tools for the job. 5th edition D&D is, 1, it's fantasy, but 2, it's high fantasy. Like, you're basically superheroes when you really think about it.
So compared to your average commoner, you're superheroes.
If you're doing anything other than that, like like my current live stream game it's 5th edition, but it's in like the 1980s in LA and stuff like that. But aside from the setting change, it's still very much the same thing. They're basically superheroes. I mean, that's what the game gives you. If you try to do like a low fantasies game, like say you wanted to do something more like a Game of Thrones style fantasy, like a lower fantasy, that would not work in 5th edition. Not really.
I ran into that when I was running my Dark Souls game, because I wanted to kind of be low fantasy. And the further into the game I got, I was just like, this really doesn't work. The amount of shit I'd have to cut out in order for it to be low fantasy is staggering.
Like, people have launched entire reworks of the game. Like, there's a Souls-like version of D&D. There's like a D&D 5e Advanced, someone called it. Like, there are complete reworks of 5th edition. Mm-hmm. But I find, like, you didn't really need to, when you could have just used another system that already exists, is amazing, and like does what you want it to do. There's plenty of them out there. Like you want an apocalyptic game. I mean, Cypher's great, but there's also other ones that you want powered by the apocalypse. That's a really good one for apocalyptic game as well. Fate, like there's numerous ways you could go about this.
Yeah, so essentially what we're trying to say here, folks, is keep an open mind to new systems, because you never know when you're going to come across your Cypher or your Fate. And like, although like D&D is really fun and everything, I still love playing it. I'm really happy we came across these new systems.
Now, before we move on, because I've got a couple of questions from random people on the internet and stuff. Before we move on, was there any other advice you wanted to give, or any other talking points you had for your infinite wisdom that you could share?
It's very generous of you. I feel like to new DMs out there, when you're planning out your world for the first time, less is more. You don't have to set up every step along the adventurer's path, because you're going to find that the players are going to deviate from that path a lot. This is going to cause you frustration, because you want them to go to section A, but they're now going to jump off to go to section C, then D, whatever, and they're going to derail your game. So less is more. What I tend to do is I set up the beginning and I set up the ending. How you get there is entirely up to you. And I'll have certain scenes planned out, and how you get to those scenes is entirely up to you. But they'll be fixed, quote unquote, cut scenes.
Yeah.
To set up the next stage. So yeah, no, less is more. 100%.
I fully agree with that. That's one of the things I've always touted. I think it's even one of my random videos or whatever. Don't micromanage or plan everything. If you've got important bits, I do what I call modular design. It's okay, say you want them to fight this particular encampment of goblins. Great. The goblins don't have to be in the forests, but if they decided to go up into the mountains, great. Maybe the goblins were a mountain tribe. It's okay to make a basic premise of what you need, but then, yeah, as the players do things, because they will go the opposite direction you expect them to. Yeah, you can just shuffle things around.
Absolutely. When I'm going back to the Dark Souls game, when you guys got to the walled city inside the city within a city. You were we're going to go into the sewers. I was like, wait, what? Yeah. Okay. And I was I'm sitting there, I'm shuffling papers and whatnot. I'm like, okay, all right, we'll do this now then. And you're going to fight the Rat King. There we go.
Yeah. And you're here. Which honestly, in the moment, we didn't realize that you didn't have that fully planned out or whatever.
No, yeah.
You did it pretty flawlessly, to be honest.
That was planned out for a later episode, and you're like, we're gonna go into sewers now. And I knew you at some point you guys were gonna go into the sewers, because you're all sewer rats when it comes down to it. Every party always goes into the sewer, regardless of the campaign.
Yeah, really.
So I planned out a sewer scene. I just didn't plan for it to happen then. And like you said, modular scenes. It really helps.
Yeah. Because I imagine that sewer scene you planned out probably was for if we had entered literally any sewer area in the city, you were and it's here. So
yeah.
That's the best way to do it. It's sort of showing a little bit behind the curtain, but basically giving the players an illusion of choice makes them feel like it's more sandboxy than it really is.
Yeah, like I will never say which area the Series was supposed to take place in, but if you can recall the Dungeons and Dragons game that we played with that, you could probably figure it out. There's a very big gap.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I remember then. All right. Well, let's. We got a couple. We'll finish this up here. Say we were at like 45 minutes. Yeah. Let's do a couple of like little quick questions here that we have found from people on the internet. Let's choose randomly from this list here. So we will say. Here we are. What do we have here? So this one's from Capitan Nemo. I'm stuck as the forever DM. So when I run a campaign, I use an NPC as my character in the party. It has its own character sheet and everything. I consider it a real party member. Is that an okay thing to do?
Capitan, you have to be very careful with adding NPCs into your party, because the party's going to look at it as like a quote-unquote babysitter to kind of like point the players in the right direction, and B, you don't want them doing all the important stuff. You want your players doing that. You want them to like disarm that trap, open that lock, check out that chest. You want them to get the killing blow on the big bad. So you got to be very careful with adding like NPCs into your group, and like you can add them to be like to fill a niche. Like, hey, we don't have a healer. Hey, I'm gonna throw this healer in there. But it sounds like you're introducing this character as if your character is like in the game.
It does sound like it's less of an NPC and more like the DMPC type of situation. Which brings up
it's very easy to have a bias towards your own character where, this mob's not going to attack my character, it's going to attack your character. You got to be very careful with that kind of stuff because players will pick up on that real fast.
Yeah, you've covered, I think, some of the biggest can of worms situations here. It's really from the player side of things. It's not a great thing usually, because they're always going to be wondering if you're playing favoritism to yourself, because whether you are or not, because it's your character. I just wouldn't do it unless it was a very small group, like you only had like 2 players and you realized you needed like a third character in there or something.
Yeah. So when introducing NPCs or your own PC into the party as a DM, I would go with a light touch.
And you as a DM, I've whether it's an DMPC or running, like when you're running combat and there's like already like a lot of bad guys compared to the party, like 2-3 times the amount of bad guys compared to the party, which is something I don't do often. You already have so many more turns you're taking compared to the players. Like they're sitting there watching you play the game virtually by yourself. If you're adding a DMPC in on top of this, or other NPCs in the party, like even multiple NPCs, really it's a bunch of people at a table at that point, occasionally getting to do something, but really just kind of watching you play the game with yourself. Yeah.
Like you don't want to like add more to your you got already so many spinning plates. You got like the world, the PCs, you got the NPCs, you got the bad guys, you got the environment. Why would you ever add another spinning plate?
So I think that was a pretty good answer for Capitan Nemo there.
It's a good question.
If you see this, we suggest against it. You don't really need it. You are playing the world. You're playing all of the NPCs in the world. You're playing like the monsters. Your character is everything else. I'm not sure if you really need your own character sheet. I get the draw for it, but I mean, part of the reason I prefer the DM seat over the player seat is due to the fact that, like, I have a little bit of character ADD. Like, it's hard for me sometimes to stick with one character for a very long time because I'm like, this would be cool, and this would be cool, and this would be cool, especially since I've been a forever DM for a long time before recently.
Yeah.
But being a DM helps you with that because you're like, yeah, I can make 17 NPCs if I need to. I can use all of these ideas. Yeah,
and like being a DM, like you said, really scratches that niche. I could sit here and like bang out like 4 or 5 DMPCs for the party to interact with down the way. But it like I said, like it's not the same as if like you were playing. Like to be stuck as a forever DM, I can't imagine, like that must suck.
Yeah.
So like you just want to, it is very refreshing to have you sit next to us at the player roster instead of opposed to us on the other side of the DM screen.
All right, let's pick up another random question here. This one's going to be from Super Charles XYZ. How do I make it clear to my players that they can't fight their way out of this one? Quotes. I want to run a strong monster that can easily beat the party to make them find another way to reach their goal. How can I do that without outright just killing their characters if they decide to try and fight it? I'm afraid they may not take the hint and get themselves killed thinking they're invulnerable.
This is one I've struggled with, and I generally try and stay away from these types of encounters because I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The party's fucking dumb. When you want them to fight, they'll talk. When you want them to talk, they'll run. When you want them to run, they sit and fight.
Yes.
When you want them to go through that door, they end up finding a loose ceiling tile and going through that and finding some secret area that you didn't plan for. So there's no way to really, like, without like being blatant, like big words on the screen, fucking run. Even then, they're going to sit and fight. It's really... It's not an easy situation to come to, because, like, then, like, if you're... You don't want to TPK your party, because then the story's over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, like... It's really hard to, like, pick that up and, like, try and save that. So... You kind of have to keep the pressure on, like, hey, this is a very overbearing foe, you need to run away. But, like, your party's just not picking up the hint, so, like, what do you do?
I think one of the mistakes that a lot of, especially newer GMs, but like even some seasoned GMs make and whatnot, is they'll be like, this would be a cool type, like they take a scene from a movie or a TV show and they'd be like, this would be a really cool thing to do in the game. But here's the thing, it's not a movie. It's not a pre-scripted event. You're in an event dealing with real life people in a live situation, and it's a game. It's not a movie. There are a lot of scenes that just don't work. You can't shoehorn them in. I'm not saying you can't do this type of situation. I have done this type of situation before, but one, you have to know your players, know what kind of play style they have, and maybe have expectations that maybe this is the type of world where they're going to come across shit that is just too hard for them to deal with.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, it's like players don't like to lose either. So when they run away from an encounter, on the rare chances that they do run away, they feel like they've lost. They feel defeated. So there's a point of pride where it's like you have like this 7-armed Balrog wielding 6 flaming swords and a whip that's bearing down on them. And they're like, well, I don't want to run away. I want to stay and fight the beast and get his like treasure and stuff like that and get the XP. And then they end up dying. And they look at you like, well, that counter was fucking bullshit. It was so imbalanced, da-da-da.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, I feel like that is a really good example you brought up. That scene from the Lord of the Rings in the Mines of Moria. Because I feel like Gandalf was like the DM's NPC. Yeah. And like the rest of the group were the PCs. And in this case, it was like, this works in the movie because it was a badass scene. But in a game, think about it. It's the DMPC using like a Deus Ex Machina to save the group, which are like no-nos. Like, you want the group to have agency to save the day and be awesome, not have the DM defeat the DM's own DM stuff.
Then you're just sitting there watching the DM play the game. He's sitting there playing with himself, and you're just watching.
And then meanwhile, you've got this encounter that's too hard, but then the DM PC takes care of it and pushes you. Like, it's great in a movie. It is a prime example. I think you brought up the perfect one. It's a prime example of this. Works in a movie. This would be terrible in the game.
Yeah. Like, there are ways you can subtly tell your players to run. Like, let's say, like, they're going against a horde of goblins. Well, fucking goblins, well, whatever. You can knock out a goblin super quick. But when there's, like, a large amount of goblins and they're coming in faster than you can kill them, it kind of tells the players that they need to go. Especially if, like, the cave is coming down around them, the earth's shaking, the goblins are firing arrows at them, and, like, the wall breaks away behind them to reveal, like, sunlight, and they're like, oh, shit, we gotta go. There's this really good ways of like telling them that they need to go without saying you need to go.
I have one of the times I've successfully pulled this off without setting too many expectations ahead of time. Actually, for if anyone wants tips on how to do this, is it was an urban campaign, so there was a lot of other people around and stuff, which was super nice. It was like a big bad guy type of thing, and the players noticed this big monster thing coming in. I forget what it was. I think it was a dragon. I can't remember. But to reinforce how tough this fucker was, I had another obviously higher level adventuring party go in to fight the monster first right in front of him. Like, they basically like cut in front, like, we're going first, and then get mercilessly slaughtered. Like, the upper half of like the paladin's torso like rolled towards the party as he's like, oh! Like, it was obvious the party was not going to handle this if these like decked out super adventurers just got like completely raffle stomped.
Yeah, lead by example kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's doable, but it's, once again, pick what kind of scenes you want to do for being more appropriate for a game.
Yeah. And like you said,
other ways.
Yeah. A lot of people, a lot of DMs like pull scenes from movies and like, oh yeah, like you said, they look cool, don't really work at a table.
Yeah. Well, it's been about an hour. I think that is pretty damn good. We weren't sure how long it would go for, but I think an hour is a pretty good time. So I want to thank you for coming out and chatting with me.
Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. I'm really glad it came out. I would love to do this again in the future if you have an open spot, but I know you got like a number of people are lining up to sit down at their table with you.
Yeah, I will. I've got a bunch of other people to go through. I'm sure we can have more chit chat. There's been some other stuff I've made notes on. I'm like, I want to talk about this, but I'm like, we'll be here for like 4 hours if we keep this up.
No, I can sit here and talk D&D and games and all that stuff for hours. Like I only gone through like one page of notes. Like I got 3 or 4 pages to go through.
Yeah, it's like the hour just flew by. I'm very impressed with how fast that flew by. But yeah, thank you for coming out. It was I super appreciate it. I'm hoping this series, I hope all my guests are as awesome as you. We'll see.
Set the bar real high, did I?
Yeah, you did. All right, we'll see how that goes.
All right, thanks for having me, man.
All right, and goodbye, everybody. Stay tuned. Don't forget to check out the other videos. I've got a bunch of other awesome stuff there. D&D, Cypher, general GM tips, player tips, all of that stuff. Check out the rest of the YouTube channel. Have yourself a good one.